my name is Fatima. I am the co-chair of the Aberdeen Independence Movement. I'm also a director of a nationwide campaign called 50-50 Parliament, where we're trying to elect more women into politics. I recently worked for SNP MEP, a Scottish National Party member of European Parliament, who worked mainly in Brussels or Strasbourg parliaments. But obviously, all of us were made redundant due to Brexit. I did my undergraduate at Robert Gordon University, and I studied journalism. Then I worked as a journalist for a year, before going back to do a master's course at the University of Birmingham in International Development. And I've worked for a humanitarian organisation called Islamic Relief, joining them first as a policy and research intern, then as a part of the fundraising team. And right now, yeah, I'm just here continuing with my online activism and getting involved in different Black community projects as well in Aberdeen.
So I want to get your view about racism in Scotland, racism in Aberdeen.
Okay, so I do feel that Aberdeen, because we are, to be honest, at a national level, the Black population is below 1%. I think I've got that correct. Yeah, below 1% the last time as far as I'm aware. So to people who are looking at Scotland and racism, they feel that we don't have a problem because of we don't have a huge Black and minority ethnic population, unlike in England. But I think the problem here is that some people are focused on a particular kind of racism, which is to them must be visible. They must make use of your race. But there's so many different forms of racism, such as unconscious bias and subtle forms of racism, and that spans across all sectors and affects Black and minority and ethnic people in the job markets, in education. And it sadly does exist in Scotland. And I think these protests and discussions have highlighted and drawn attention to the fact that we do have an issue of racism in Scotland, even before the Black Lives Matter movement, sorry. So I'm jumping over my words just here. Even before the Black Lives Matter movement, there's this particular comedy writer, an amazing comedy writer that I follow called Amina Salim. So she was invited on to BBC Scot 9 to discuss the Meghan Markle issue. Obviously, that was a national debate, and for her to sit there and be told by a middle-aged white man, well, for him to suggest that there is no issue of racism, and that the explicit tone that some newspapers are using against Meghan Markle that were actually forms of racism, for her to say that it doesn't exist to a person who has been at the receiving end of racism was such a slap in the face. And I think people don't realize that because you don't experience racism, it's because obviously you're in a privileged position not to. You're not from a race that would experience racism. So I feel that a lot of people are missing that key discussion and awareness that you're not going to experience racism if you're not from a race that's targeted for that. So we do have an issue of racism in Scotland. We do need to discuss it. And these protests, just looking at the comments under some articles, I was interviewed by the Evening Express in the lead up to the picture protests, and some of the comments I was seeing, some people denying that there's aspects of racism whilst using racist rhetoric. So I think there's a lot of there's a lack of awareness there, and it's definitely something we need to discuss.
If you could talk a bit about the protest regarding
okay. I've been very vocal about not protesting during the pandemic. I think my Facebook posts have actually attracted a lot of media attention because I had quite a lot of contacts from different media outlets about my posts on the main Black Lives Matter protest. So it's not that I didn't talk to a lot of media because I didn't want the media to spin it as like I'm against our movement. But my only concern was that we arranged a picture protest as a safer alternative, because we also need to take into consideration that Black and minority ethnic people are in the higher risk group. We are reporting the highest rates of deaths during this COVID pandemic, and it has a lot to do with the fact that we are in a position where we don't have as much safety, where most of us are working. It's a lot of socioeconomic factors that have made us more susceptible to COVID-19. So I took that into consideration, and also the picture protest was started by May and Hannah from Hysteria Aberdeen. I joined later on, and this was organised as a safer alternative where people would go out and put pictures of support, and that was wonderful.
Yeah.
The issues we had with the march were the gatherings, the social distancing. So I'm on the side of our situation is urgent, but not as urgent as America. America's protest was reactionary because George Floyd was murdered on their soil. Whereas our one, we are also trying to raise awareness of racism in our country and make it relevant to Scotland. So I did feel that this was something we could do online in a safe manner, and then take to the streets when social distancing was lifted, recognizing that our situation wasn't as urgent and reactionary as America. So I did post repeatedly, let's not protest, let's not do it. It still went ahead. I was worried that the protests, if we did, we'd be blamed for a second wave by those who are against the Black Lives Matter movement, and that is clearly happening. If I read the comments on Fubar News and Evening Express, we are already being blamed, even though I think people need to get themselves educated on the incubation period for COVID-19 and when symptoms start presenting. So that would happen a day after. So I was just worried about how that in this situation, I do look at the fact that you won't always get to do something without it going sideways a bit. Yeah. So I always use the test of, will we be doing more harm than good or more good than harm? And with protesting, I felt we were doing more harm than good. So that's why I was trying to push the picture protest alternative. The protest still went ahead. I'm still part of the Black Lives Matter movement, but I do feel that we also need to understand the consequences of our actions during COVID-19 as well.
Yeah, that was an interesting view, and actually, I hope people don't get to blame us because they're just looking for a blame to say, oh, you guys, you see what you've done, you see what you've caused. Yeah, you worsening things. I hope that the number reduces back, and I hope we get back to our normal life.
But it also raised something really interesting, because when people were against the protests, Black Lives Matter protests, that's people fighting for their lives. People were against us protesting during COVID. But if you look at the comments under the Black Lives Matter protests on Fubar News, in comparison to the comments under people going out to shop in Primark when it opened, you can see that we still have a problem. Black Lives Movement, we were getting slaughtered for those people who chose to go out and protest, being blamed for COVID. Then if you look at the comments under Primark on the same Fubar News, people are like, oh, each to their own, I'll wear a mask then and go out and shop and etc. So it does suggest that there's a lot of double standards here and we still have a problem. So yeah.
So also I want to know if do you feel this current global protest will bring a meaningful, sustainable change to the issue of racism?
To be honest, this is not the first time, especially America has gone out on the streets to protest against racism. Remember, this Black Lives Matter hashtag has existed long before the George Floyd murder, and not much has changed. So all we have is just people listening and no action. So I think I do feel that improvements will be made now because more people are becoming aware. This all lives argument that's used against the Black Lives Matter argument has really brought to light a problem that we have in understanding racism. And I don't remember that hashtag existing when last time the Black Lives Matter movement was used. So I really do think that this will actually raise a new angle in which we can discuss racism and deal with racism. Sadly, I do feel that there is a strong case of all talk and no action. And I do feel that one of the first steps we can actually start doing something about racism is through our education curriculum. And as I understand, there is a lot of intentions there to decolonize the curriculum, because I do feel that our curriculum as it stands, our curriculum in Scotland is great, but I do feel it's fatally flawed. And because of that, I feel that the racism we see in Scotland, no matter what form, maybe it's the microaggressions, the subtle forms of racism, are a symptom of our failure to educate people on our colonial past, Black history, our direct connections to slavery. So I do feel that this All Lives Matter hashtag, going back to the All Lives Matters hashtag, will really try and push things forward. So I do hope there is a change. Sadly, I won't be surprised if there isn't, because if we look at history and how we've protested before, nothing much has come from that. But I do believe that now people are waking up.
So at what points, what are the things we should look out for to know that indeed this protest has been successful, or this protest has been different with the previous kind of protest that has gone on? What are the things we should look out for?
We should look at results. We should look at them listening to the Black and minority ethnic community, especially because this is about Black Lives Matter protests. I do feel that Black people, within the Black and minority ethnic community, Black people do experience further forms of oppression, because we've got this issue of colorism as well. You can even see that among lighter skinned Black people. They don't face as much disadvantages as darker skinned Black people. So I do feel that results will come if we are listened to in terms of decolonizing the curriculum to include Black history, and also consider teaching the positive contributions of Black people throughout British history. And there is some good and positive contributions from Black people to Scottish history as well. So if these are actually brought into the curriculum, then I know that change is happening. And so these are one of the results I'm looking at. And also in terms of data collection, if we roll out the same data collection methods every year, and we see an improvement in terms of employment gains, educational gains, and because we do have a problem of the Black and minority ethnic gap in education sector as well. So if I see a sustained improvement in those statistics, then I definitely know that all this talk is actually working. So that's how I'm looking to measure results, through evidence and changes to our curriculum.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. In order for this fight against racism at this point, in order for it not to be as the previous ones, the ones that we've had in the past, like you stated, that Black Lives Matter has been in existence for some time. They've been protesting for a very long time. So in order for us to make sure that this is not like the previous ones, in order for us to make sure that this brings a change that we really want to see, although the change might not be instantly, but let's start seeing it. What do you think we should be doing to keep the momentum, so that it doesn't just be a normal trend that has trended away and we're back to the old days?
Okay, so I do feel that we should take it upon ourselves to keep the momentum going online, because everyone, to be honest, I don't think it's a far reach when I'm saying everyone is using social media now. There might be a small minority that are not, but a lot of people are using social media. So keeping the momentum going online and sharing resources. And I do think that it's up to, I do make a point to say that white people are not the problem, it's racists that are the problem. So I do feel that, but because we know that the history of racism has been inflicted by one race, I do think it's important that the dominant race that has come about as a result of racism, they need to educate themselves about racism and understand their privilege and be really good allies. So that's really important.
So we spoke with Christy Blackman yesterday, and I asked her this question. I'm going to ask you the same question, so that let me just get your view about it. What would you say is a equitable way forward against the fight of racism?
I think I've mentioned this like earlier on, and I keep referring to it on purpose. And I do definitely feel it's through our curriculum, because we're talking about young people, impressionable minds. I feel that racism is learned behavior. So it's something definitely that people can unlearn and educate themselves through awareness. Like I know people are tired of hearing the words education all the time, but it is really important and it is really vital. It shapes us into our future selves. So, and obviously education is compulsory at primary level, certainly, and to a certain stage at secondary level. So definitely, I feel that to be able to achieve that sustainable and equitable change, that is definitely decolonizing the curriculum is a first step. It's not the end, but it's certainly a means to the end through our education curriculum.
Okay, sounds interesting. Um, few people I spoke with earlier on, some of them suggested that it's not just education, but the kind of people we appoint to or we elect to lead us,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the ideology, and so what do you have to say regarding the kind of people that leads us?
Loads. So basically, we have the likes of our Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who Kirsty Blackman actually challenged him on Donald Trump.
Yeah,
So she put the question to him. She wanted to find out if she still felt that Donald Trump was the stand-up. I'm rephrasing her here. I'm not quoting her directly.
yeah,
Was a man that we should be led to believe, like the stand-up person. And his response was like, America is a bastion of freedom and peace and has been in his lifetime. Again, I'm rephrasing him here. I probably got
yeah,
the quote
yeah.
correct. But he said that, and he still suggests that Donald Trump is the right person, despite looking at what's going on in the media, despite reading about the America's dangerous approach to tackling systemic, institutional, and all kinds of racism in the country. He's seen that approach, and he's still coming out with that sort of rhetoric. So that is problematic. The kind of people we elect, and they would be explicit in perpetuating negative ideas about Black people. They would be complicit in sustaining and upholding systemic and institutional and all kinds of forms of racism. And I do feel that Boris Johnson is part of that problem. He tried to claim that America is a bastion of peace and freedom during his lifetime, but during his lifetime, Black people weren't allowed to vote in America. So I really want to understand his definition of America being a bastion of peace and freedom, if that issue still persisted during his lifetime. So we also looked at recently, I think this was yesterday or the day before, her name escapes me, but he recently selected someone to lead the race. So they've set up a new, is it a committee or group, to look into racism in the UK. And they've appointed someone who basically denied racism existed in the UK, and who is basically pandering to the whitewashed history of our country to lead tackling racism in the UK. So that is another problematic issue. So our leaders, the people that we elect, that's the reason. Obviously, it's an obvious thing to point out that that's the reason why we're here, that we have this huge issue when we have leaders that are who are complicit in furthering racist rhetoric. You know, Boris Johnson referred to Black people as having watermelon smiles, and they can try and justify whatever they say, but there is no positive spin in racism. Racism is not an opinion when it concerns someone's identity, and your words can literally put a target in someone's back. So our leaders, yes, we have a problem here.
Yeah. So I also noticed that there's also a protest, a call for taking down statute of people that were involved in slave trade in the
Yeah.
past. What are your views about that? Do you think taking down those statues will cause any change or have any effect?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I've heard arguments on both sides, and these are the arguments coming from both sides are actually people who are part of the anti-racism campaign. So there's one part of who would like to keep the statues up for their reasons, and another part who would like to take them down. So I've also looked at because I do feel that the streets names as well has been raised in this debate as well in Glasgow, about replacing street names as well. So there is also two sides to that debate. And the people who vote on leaving statues and street names up, they suggest that we should do so to remind us of the harm and discriminatory acts and slavery that was committed on our soil. And we should put plaques underneath to outline what they've done. But I'm actually on the side of taking them down, because I do feel like keeping, when you erect a statue, when you put a street name, people when they look at it are obviously the first is usually done for the reason of celebration.
Yeah.
Is usually done for the reason to mark them out as some kind of hero that's worth remembering in a positive way. And I feel that keeping them up and putting plaques underneath with the wrong they have done is not going to be very effective, because who's going to want to stop and look at it? Because the first thing you see from afar is, oh, they've probably done something good. That's why they're taking up all the space here. So I believe we should take them down and make a big statement of doing so, in announcing repeatedly why. And then in our history, we can include, okay, this street name was named this for this reason and was changed to this, because I feel that we will drive the anti-racism message much stronger. And if we actually take these down, rename them, and make a big statement about why we're renaming them. So yeah.
I understand you were once a student of RGU.
Yeah.
That's I'm really impressed about that. That's that, at least. Again, I'm speaking with someone that has gone through what I've gone through, that has gone through what I'm going through. So at least
Yeah.
some kind of encouragement and motivation from you. So I
That's
want
nice.
to know, when you were in Aberdeen, when you were when you were in RGU, I'm sure you had
Yeah.
some friends from other parts of Africa and other blacks from other places.
To be honest, because so I was born and brought up in Aberdeen, and to be
Okay.
honest, through our primary school, I was the only, well, my family were the only black people there. RGU, I studied journalism. I was the only black person on my course. I graduated in 2014, so I didn't have any black friends actually on campus. Maybe I did have that one, but they were studying oil and gas, so it was the stereotypical kind of subjects that you'd associate with black people. And yeah, so to be honest, no, I wouldn't say I had like any black friends on campus. At the time, I was the only black person in my course. I barely saw any black person on campus. So yeah, no, I didn't really.
So I was it like I was life like as a Scottish with an African origin. How was it like for you?
Well, to be honest, I didn't really recognize because growing up in where I am in West Hill, it's a predominantly white suburb. It's recognized as one of the most affluent areas, and I don't think I really understood my privilege in terms of the amount of racism targeted towards me, because I wasn't living in an area where it was more pronounced, like say in some places in Glasgow. So I think I didn't really recognize that I was actually different. And some people might say, oh, that's good, but I actually think it's a problem, because it made me feel that when issues of racism did occur, I didn't understand it and I didn't notice it. I just let it go, because I felt, okay, maybe everyone got those same comments, not realizing that those comments were steeped in racism. It took leaving primary school to realize I actually had a teacher who did hurl racist comments at me at, at times, and I've called her out on social media during this Black Lives Matter movement, and it's sad, really, that it took leaving school, it took being more aware of what racism was, that made me understand that. So I think growing up in Aberdeen, where I was like the only black person in nearly every room I was in, made it. I didn't realize. Yeah, it's kind of like I was shielded from this racism. Not really, well, shielded from understanding it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was that. Yeah, that was my experience growing up, and I wish there were other black people for me to see around and see how they're treated as well, to understand that. So yeah.
Okay. So what do you have to say to um to other people, black, white, who feels that no, this is not my issue. I don't have to be involved with it. I'm not facing it. I'm not going through it. So it's none of my business. What do you have to say to those kind of people?
It's everyone's problem. And for those people who don't think it's everyone's problem, all those people who are talking about all lives matter as an argument against Black Lives Matter, they're in themselves stating that it is their problem, because they believe that all lives matter, but they can't understand that
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter too. They're ignoring that. So it is everyone's problem. If you believe that everyone should achieve. It's funny because the Black Lives Matter movement is just Black people who have been at the receiving end of persistent discrimination, enslaved for their race, and denied any form of dignity, murdered for being who they are. If you look at cases years, decades, centuries back, at the point that Black people, when they were enslaved as well, they could just be killed without, and their murderers wouldn't be held accountable. So if we're looking at everyone saying that it's not their problem, we are all one human race. And if you want to stand there and deny the rights of people, of other people from the human race, then you in yourself have a problem, because you're looking at people being denied the right to live and you saying you're okay with that. So just listen to yourself, really. We're fighting for our lives, and people are like, oh no. It's funny. It's like I'm speechless. Like, I can't even find the words to delineate to my disgust at some of the rhetoric I've seen. So really, it's no, it's everyone's problem, because it will affect you too. Because I feel that we're missing out a lot in great minds, because the failure to diversify and make use of our multicultural country is the reason why we can't make rich policies, because we don't have many minds at the table. And as I've mentioned, Black people have made positive contributions. They've just been erased from history, and people don't realize that. So it is everyone's problem, because we're missing out a lot.
Yeah, and I felt that some of the Black community are a bit kind of discouraged from coming out there to express their gifts or talent in any other way, because they feel like they are not. Some of them feel like they are not acceptable. Some of them feel like, no, even if I try to make an effort, I might not get there. People have gone through that based on some testimonies I've heard in the past since we started this project. Some testimonies, people say, oh, I feel I can't come out because I'm shy, I've been looked down upon, I've been looked down in a way, I've been depressed because of my skin and all those things. What you being I would say a successful person that people look up to? Yeah, because I've seen your post, I've seen your project, I've seen where you're involved, I've seen what you're doing, and I'm sure there are a lot of Black young people that are looking up to you. So I just want you to give some words of encouragement to these people.
It's such a shame, really, that we find a lot of Black people saying that this internalized hatred, due to years and years of bias towards the capabilities of Black people, is really sad, to the point that we've internalized this, and we've made ourselves feel that we are not worth anything. And I'm not going to pretend that I've always felt I've had to work like triple the amount, because you see me here, I'm not only Black, but I'm a woman, not only a woman, but a Muslim woman, and I am a darker skinned Black woman. So I won't pretend. Like, I feel that if I didn't present myself as the way I was, like if I was a different race, I would have been further up, because of the amount of experience, the amount of work experience I've gained, the amount of read, the amount of degrees I'm accumulating, and all that. I think if it was my white counterpart, I think they would have found themselves in a better position than I am here. So sadly, I do feel that we do have to work harder, but I don't know what else to say, but just keep going, just find that focus, find that passion that drives you, because to be honest, there's so many points, like even some of the posts I put on, the amount of people who knock you down all the time, and I feel you just have to, it gets to a point where you just build that thick skin and that drive that you keep going, because sometimes when I read comments now, I kind of just laugh at them, and they just keep me going. So I'll be like, okay, I'm seeing this comment, clearly we still have a problem, let's keep going. So yeah, I don't know what else to say, but look for a role model as well. Like, to be honest, my role models, I wouldn't say I don't, apart from my mom, obviously, to state the obvious, I don't think I have any other Black role models in Aberdeen. A lot of them are white politicians that I look up to. or from the BAME community within the party that I'm a member of. There are a lot of them that keep me going. A lot of them have been really supportive. Like my biggest supporter is actually a white male who has been really supportive of my participation in politics within my party. So it's really about finding a role model, finding a support system, and just to help you, because I feel everyone needs that support system, no matter what race you're from. But for Black people, of course, we find that we have to work a bit harder. So just keep going. If you want to reach out to me as well, like, just feel free to talk to me at any point, and I'll make time for you. But let's just bring each other up. That's all I can say. Yeah.
I'm sure you start receiving a lot of messages on your inbox now with people hearing what you just said. I'm sure they'll get in touch. I'm sure a lot of people will get in touch, including myself. So
That's good.
do you have any other final words you want to say? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, it's just that the whole point of the Black Lives Matter movement is just to draw attention to histories of systemic and racial abuse against one race, and just to educate and raise awareness of how we can overcome this and how this is better for everyone. It's not a movement to suggest all lives. It's not a movement to suggest that all lives don't matter. It's not a we versus them. The problem are racists, not white people. It's not, as I'll repeat, it's not a we versus them. So that's the whole point of the Black Lives Matter movement. Right now, it's the Black race that needs everyone's help.
Yeah.
We rally around different minority groups all the time, but we're seeing backlash when Black lives want help. So just understand that. I really hope that people understand that we are in a situation where we are seeing racial inequality still existing centuries after slavery was abolished. So I think it was 1863 in Britain and then 1888 in the US. So we need to work together to stamp out racism. It's everyone's problem. Everyone should be involved. We should all stand up. It's not enough to just be not racist. We have to be anti-racist, call it out, don't be a bystander. So that's my final words. The Black Lives Matter movement is not trying to say that no one else matters. It's just trying to draw attention to the fact that one race doesn't seem to matter. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Fatima, for having time to speak with us in this kind of situation. We really need your words. We really need people like you to speak regarding this issue, to push us, to give us motivation, inspiration.